Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Restoration Pavilion this Saturday. You can take your seats. We'll now begin our session. Welcome to the Scaling Up Land Restoration, Bridging Large-Scale and Grassroots Efforts for Sustainable and Long-Lasting Impact. I'll have the privilege now to introduce Bethany Welder. She is the Executive Director of SIR, Society for Ecological Restoration. In she has more than 30 years of experience in environmental conservation, education, and restoration. She's guiding SIR's mission in driving science, ecological restoration across the globe. Bethany serves on a variety of global restoration advisory boards and task forces. She's also the co-author of several restoration resources, including SIR's International Principles and Standards for Practice of Ecological Restoration. Bethany has an undergraduate degree in political science and international studies from the Duke University, and a Master's of Science in International Environmental Studies from the University of Montana. We'll have the opportunity to listen to Bethany presenting the published resource guide to Target 2 of the Kunming-Montreal GBF, the Global Biodiversity Framework. Welcome, Bethany, to the stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just set my timer here, make sure I don't go over. I'll use this one. Okay. All right. So thanks so much to the Global Lands Initiative for the invitation to speak with you all today about some work we've been doing actually with the Convention on Biological Diversity. And this work is very relevant also to UNCCD, so we're pleased to be able to share this. I'm going to talk today about delivering restoration outcomes for biodiversity and human well-being. This is a new guide that was released in October at the CBD COP. All the names there are part of the author team. I think there's 15 or 20 people on the author team, but that's the lead author team that we worked with FAO, the Secretariat from the CBD, and SCR, as well as C4 ICRAF. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the background, purpose, and development of the guide, the actual guidance for the key elements of Target 2, which again we think are very relevant also to UNCCD, a few case studies, and some additional tools. And this is the QR code for the guide. So if you're interested in accessing the guide, I don't know if I have that QR code again, but we can pull it back up as needed. So this guide was developed over about an 18-month period, starting in October 2023. I guess not quite 18 months, maybe 12 months. Starting in June 2023. It's hard to read this from here. We did a series of online webinars, and then in November, we had an in-person meeting with a lot of parties present. I think there were about 50 parties present at that meeting. To gather input. And then in May of 2024, we presented the first draft at the CBD SBSTA meeting. And then we had an open consultation period. We made a lot of revisions. We received a lot of party feedback. And then we finally launched the guide at the CBD COP in October. So to develop this guide, we consulted a lot of different existing guidance, including new guidance that's coming out on behalf of the Global Biodiversity Framework. As a reminder, this is to address Target 2 of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And if you look on the right here, I'm not sure if there's a little pointer, we were specifically focused on the CBD short-term action plan for ecosystem restoration and the other resources that have been developed in conjunction with that. So the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework has 23 targets. And I think one of the things that we've heard a lot about restoration is that restoration is a thread that weaves through all of the conventions. It's relevant to the UNFCCC, it's relevant to the CBD, it's relevant to the CCD. So we have these restoration is really relevant across all of these different conventions. It's also relevant across all of the KMGBF targets. So the language here on this screen is the actual restoration language for the target to ensure that by 2030, at least 30% of areas of degraded terrestrial, inland water, and coastal and marine ecosystems are under effective restoration. And that's I want to be very specific about that. It's not that they are restored. It's that 30% of the land, water, and coastal and marine areas are under effective restoration by 2030 in order to enhance biodiversity, ecosystem functions and services, ecological integrity, and connectivity. And as we mapped this out against the other targets, we really found that restoration is relevant to every one of the GBF targets. So the purpose of this guide is to take us from commitment to action. So in the guide, we talk about the fact that the promise of ecosystem restoration is profound, and the global challenge is to actually meet that promise. And this guide is to help us do that work. That was really loud. Just wait till that's finished. So the purpose of this guide is to help do that work. And Target 2 specifically elevates and coalesces work on existing country commitments to the SDGs, to other multilateral agreements, including LDN, and into a global objective for restoration for life on Earth. So it's a very, very important opportunity. The target includes 4 key elements. So first, it includes a number of key elements. First, it addresses all ecosystem types: inland waters, which is CBD speak for freshwater, coastal and marine ecosystems, and terrestrial ecosystems. It starts with defining the baseline, and then parties have to set national targets, identify their 4 key outcomes, and then implement effective restoration. And I'm going to briefly walk through those items. So for defining the baseline, in the guide, we've defined the baseline as the spatial extent of degraded areas within a country at the end of the baseline period, disaggregated by the major ecosystems types. So under the KMGBF, the baseline period is 2011 to 2020. So this was one of the challenging factors in the previous targets under the CBD. And so this was explicitly stated in this in the global biodiversity framework. And then it's important to recognize that the concept of degradation is context dependent, and we provide a lot of guidance related to that. So as we look at the idea of setting national targets, what we do is we recommend setting those targets across the restorative continuum. So we'll be talking more about this on Tuesday morning in the IUCN Pavilion, if anybody's interested in learning more about standards and guidance like this. But the restorative continuum is inclusive of everything that's defined as ecosystem restoration. So when we look at work happening under land degradation neutrality, that work is happening everywhere across this continuum, from improving ecosystem management to repairing ecosystem function to partially or fully recovering native ecosystems. So all of that is defined as ecosystem restoration. But if you look at this, we've really been able to articulate that remediation occurs in this left-hand side of the continuum, rehabilitation occurs in the middle, and ecological restoration occurs on the right-hand side of the continuum. So this gives us some opportunities to understand which type of restoration we're implementing and what those outcomes then are going to be. So as we look at the different types of restoration, this is a graphic from the guide, and what we talk about is if your goal is to reinstate a natural ecosystem, then you're going to be working at the right-hand side of the continuum. You're going to be doing ecological restoration. But if you're taking a degraded productive ecosystem, which is a lot of what we're working on under UNCCD, and you're moving to a higher quality productive ecosystem, so you're restoring the soils, you're restoring the ability to have grazing animals, you're restoring the ability to do agroecology or agriculture in general, then you're more likely to be using rehabilitation to go from a degraded production ecosystem or a severely degraded transformed ecosystem to a higher quality, higher, more productive, both ecologically and for human health and well-being. And so in the GBF, there are 4 outcomes: biodiversity, connectivity, ecosystem functions and services, and ecosystem integrity. When you're implementing rehabilitation, for sure, a primary outcome is always going to be ecosystem functions and services. And a supported outcome will be biodiversity and ecosystem integrity. Connectivity is encouraged across both rehabilitation and ecological restoration, but it's not necessarily primary in either. If you have the opportunity to fully implement ecological restoration, then your primary outcomes will be biodiversity, ecosystem integrity, and ecosystem functions and services. But always with rehabilitation or ecological restoration, you will get those improved ecosystem functions and services. So this another really important component of the guide is the idea of implementing effective restoration. So this was key language included in the target that says, again, that you have to bring 30% of terrestrial inland water and coastal marine areas under effective restoration. So the guide defines that as standards-based restoration underpinned by agreed principles that result in appropriately balanced, sustainable net gain that benefits and enhances biodiversity, ecosystem integrity, and human health and well-being. And so when we think about land degradation neutrality, and when we think about the Global Lands Initiative and these other initiatives under the UNCCD to improve and implement restoration, in many instances, we're looking at it as balance. We might degrade here, and then we're going to restore there, and we're going to get to neutrality. But even in the UNCCD, they say neutrality or better, right? And so the CBD target basically says that effective restoration has to go better. It has to reach sustainable net gain with benefits for people and biodiversity, both. So for people and nature. And so just one other thing. So the standards-based restoration, we have the standards of practice to guide restoration from the UN Decade. We have the SCR International Principles and Standards for restoration. We'll be talking about those again on Tuesday morning in the IUCN Pavilion. But there are many standards out there. There are rewilding standards, there are mining standards, there are freshwater standards, there are agroecology standards. So the idea is that you're using standards to reduce risk and uncertainty and improve the likelihood that your restoration will succeed. And that's why we're talking about effective restoration. So the guide includes a wide variety of resources that help integrate Target 2 into the CBD required National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans, and to help implement restoration commitments, as well as monitoring and reporting across all ecosystems. There's also very extensive annexes with a variety of additional information. There's a suite of case studies in the guide, and I recommend that you can look at those as well, and they look at different ways that restoration is being implemented in different countries. And then I also want to be clear that for Target 2 of the Convention on Biological Diversity, Global Biodiversity Framework, the FAO has developed the framework for ecosystem restoration monitoring, which is being used to monitor the implementation of this specific target, and also to implement the effectiveness of the UN Decade. And the framework includes a registry of restoration initiatives, a geospatial tool to visualize restoration data, a search engine for good practices, and a dashboard that's under development. And you can access the framework using this QR code. In addition, we've developed an e-learning tool that you can use to learn more and walk through all the resources in the guide. And the QR code on the left will take you to a new e-learning course. This was just launched in November, brand new. And coming very, very soon is a self-assessment tool that's built from the guide to help guide you to the resources that are appropriate for the guide. And I think that's the end of my presentation, and I appreciate your time and attention. And again, thanks to the GLI for the opportunity to speak with you all today.
Would anyone have questions to Bethany? I think we can take this. We have some flexibility on the timing.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question about the slide that you show. Let's see, just to the restoration continue, like the 6 different stages. Yes. So, do you have a timeline or a scale about time that you consider each phase?
That's a super interesting question and not one I've been asked about the continuum before. So thank you. The continuum is actually used to help us understand where, like, what is our goal or objective for restoration? And what are we trying to accomplish? So are we trying to repair ecosystem function, or are we trying to reinitiate a native ecosystem? So what we talk about with the continuum is that in standards-based restoration, you would always choose the highest and highest impact, highest and best restoration you can for the situation. So if you don't have a lot of money, for example, you might say, I can only do this much restoration, but I really want to do that much restoration. So you would design your restoration to keep the door open so that over time you can move further to the right on the continuum. But if as you think about standards-based restoration, if you look at your opportunities for restoration, you say, well, I'm going to do the least thing possible to meet my legal obligations. That would not be standards-based, because that would only be doing that would not be doing the highest impact restoration you can for that site and given your conditions, right? So in standards-based restoration, we encourage people, it's one of the principles, to aim for the highest thing you can achieve given the situation, not the lowest common denominator, but the highest common denominator. And then always trying to design your restoration so that you can continue moving to the right whenever possible. But there's no specific timeline. Restoration can take 50 years, it can take 10 years. And in many instances, we have to think about restoration in the context of the fact that ecosystems are dynamic, and our goal is to help nature heal itself. So we're always working to, the definition of restoration is to assist the recovery of an ecosystem that's been degraded, damaged, or destroyed. So just helping it put it back on the trajectory it was on before it was degraded, recognizing that ecosystems are dynamic and they will change over time. How do we enable it to change more effectively? Right behind you.
Yeah, regarding this 30% objective, I'm just curious, are there global efforts to characterize the trajectory of that, or to basically classify conditions according to those 6 parameters? And I mean, the whole thought fascinates me. I'm wondering what the status of that would be and how you would go about it.
It's not as detailed as this, but in the framework on ecosystem restoration monitoring, when countries report their work on Target 2, they have to say if they're doing rehabilitation or ecological restoration. So at least we'll have that split. Are you aiming for native recovery, or are you aiming for ecosystem function? So there is going to be that information documented in the reporting on this, on the specific target. But the headline indicator for target 2 is only areas, it's acres treated or area treated. But as they report under the firm, they are requested to answer whether they're doing rehabilitation or ecological restoration. So SCR is really interested in trying to understand how restoration interventions globally fall on this continuum. Is it a classic bell curve? Is it all on the left? Is it all on the right? It's a very important question for us to ask.
Thank you very much, Bethany. I think this brings us to a really interesting point where, after discussing the targets on the multilateral level, we're here at COP. We've been just coming up from COP Cali, COP Baku as well. It's important for us to reflect on the cases being implemented on the ground and how these targets reflect or not in their actions on the ground. And I would like them to begin first introducing our speakers. I'll introduce one by one. They'll come here and present for 5 minutes their cases. Later on, we'll have a panel with questions and we have a conversation with our speakers. So I would like first to introduce you to Maria Delgani Abidal. She's a landscape architect, active negotiator here at COP, currently at the Ministry for Ecological Transition of Spain, and she will introduce us to the strategic framework for the restoration of Mar Menor in Spain. You can come to the stage.
Okay. You will pass for me? Yeah. Thank you. So, in the meanwhile, good morning, everyone. My name is Maria Medina, and I work for the Ministry for the Ecological Transition in Spain. And today, I'd like to present one of the, I think, groundbreaking case studies that we are working on for ecosystem restoration. Thank you. No problem. Thank you. So, this case study is Mar Menor, is the restoration actions for Mar Menor, which is a coastal saltwater lagoon located on southeast Spain, featuring a lot of Natura 2000 sites and a variety of protected areas. It has challenging semi-arid conditions, so very low rainfall and very torrential, causing flash floods and severe damages often. And so the problem was the intensification of agriculture in the basin, together with very intense urban developments without proper sewage and wastewater treatments on the coastline, and also abandoned mine tailings in the headwaters land, have led to severe episodes of eutrophication, especially after heavy rainfall, such as the ones that we had in September 2019. So to address this issue, the ministry launched the Priority Actions Framework, which is a set of coordinated actions to be developed by a variety of public administrations with a very complex system of jurisdiction that is causing the project to move very slowly, but I think steady. It has a budget allocation of 400 million, which is unprecedented for ecological restoration in Spain, and especially in semi-arid environments like this. So the framework has many actions. I think it covers pretty much the 10 principles that underpin ecosystem restoration by the UN. And in fact, in April, we submitted this project to the call for the UN Take It on Ecosystem Restoration flagship initiatives. So as you can see, it covers policy making, full implementation of regulations, subsidies to help the transition of the economic sectors, especially agriculture, and a lot of social participation as a cross-cutting issue, trying to involve civil society and the academia as much as possible, and working with the best knowledge available. So I will briefly present the projects that I'm in charge of, that my unit is in charge of, which are number 2, ecosystem restoration and nature-based solutions. So, ecosystem restoration projects consist of an active restoration in land ecosystems that will lead to a passive restoration of the sea ecosystem. And we have divided them in 2 sets, depending on their location. So, on coastal land, we have what we call the green belt, and on headwaters land, we have mine tailing and forest restoration. The projects for the greenbelt, the first type, consists on creating semi-natural wetlands located on the mouth of the permanent water courses, expecting to reduce nitrogen, phosphorus, and suspended solids. We all know about this kind of solutions already. The second type are combined systems that we call green filters, and it consists of a first stage of treatment through wood chip bioreactors, pumping underground waters to treat the polluted aquifer, and then a few more stages that I'm not going to present because I think I'm taking too long. And then the third part of the greenbelt would be what we call rewilding areas, and they consist basically of turning mainly irrigated cropland into restored ecosystems. And the main targets of these projects are retaining sediments, restoring ecosystems, and favoring infiltration and flood control. It also intends to restore the traditional landscape that we had before the intensive irrigation systems came. And that's all from my side. Please, if you want to know more, feel free to contact me because I'd be super happy to share lessons learned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. She'll come back later for the panel and we can open discussions and questions from the audience. I'd like to introduce you now to Carolina Sampaio. She's head of partnerships at Instituto Terra, an NGO working in land restoration in Brazil for 26 years now. Welcome, Carolina.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you very much, Mateus, for the introduction, and thank you, G20, for the invitation. My name is Carolina Sampaio. I'm a biologist, and I work at Instituto Terra as the head of institutional development in Brazil. So today I would like to present to you a little bit about the Instituto Terra history. Oh, there's some problem there. Okay. First of all, I will introduce you to Instituto Terra history. And after that, I will present to you about the Terra Doce program. That is a program that we are working in order to combat the desertification process. And after that, I will show you where we are right now in terms of numbers and in terms of project. So Instituto Terra is an NGO created by the couple Lélia Vanique Salgado and the photographer Sebastião Salgado. And the intention was to bring the forest back to a land that was highly degraded in Brazil. And finally, they started in 1998. So today, 26 years before, we have this forest. We developed the ecosystem restoration there for the Atlantic forest on this region that is located in Minas Gerais state in Brazil. The Atlantic forest is the biome. Nowadays, we are trying to improve the situation on all the regions. So it is called Doce River Basin, Doce River Watershed, and is the size of Portugal. So it's a really huge watershed in Brazil. And we are trying to work with local farmers in order to develop agroforest system, water spring protection, and also we are trying to work in all of these subjects in terms trying to bring the ecological sustainability on a really great level. So how can we do this? We are working on the first step, the conversion of pasture and monocultures into sustainable agriculture. Also, we are trying to open markets for high value added products in order to sell these products that are produced in agroforest, and also the strengthening of environmental education and cultural promotion in this region. So we are trying to involve all the family, all the farmers' family, in order not just to plant the trees or not just establish the agroforest, but trying to involve people and to engage people in all the process, trying to guarantee the sustainability of this project for all over the period. So this is our approach, our methodology. It's two small letters, so I will try to explain. Our team, our local team, goes to these farms and try to engage these farmers to work with us. So the first step are to identify the situation of the farm, if there are some water springs to be protected, or if there are some lands that are able to restore, and also if the potential of the agroforest systems for this farm, if the farmer prefer coffee production or also cacao production, and we will work together trying to improve this for a sustainable way to produce food. Also, during this visit on this farm, we are trying to engage all the family on the educational projects, like the young people, also the children and the women of this family are involved in. For the next years, we are trying to achieve these ambitious goals for this region. It's not easy, it's a big challenge, but we already started. We started last year. We have important partnerships, but considering that we are an NGO, we are not profitable. So we are also looking for partners and looking for funding to guarantee these numbers. So this is our challenge right now. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Carolina. I also had the privilege to go to Instituto Terra this year, have a visit, and meet the wonderful restoration project they have. Now, I would like to introduce you to Wagner Tutor. He's a professor, full research professor at the University of Free State of South Africa, with vast experience in the post-mining sector in research. Thank you, Wagner.
Thank you, Matthias. Right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to just present a short case study of some of the work that we've been involved in trying to engage with communities in post-mining landscape restoration, reclamation, rehabilitation, depending on what phase we are on the specific mine. So how do we take grassroots initiatives and make them become imperative to these land and post-mining restoration projects? Now, scaling up land restoration, this is obviously what we all would love to see on a post-mining landscape, is that this land of variable quality, the land is not consistent in its quality, but we have to try and find areas that we can optimize the value of that land and try and make it productive. Some areas you cannot make productive, and you have to then resort to ways of trying to make it sustainable in the sense that it can function and that there's ecosystem functioning happening and good services to protect the land further. So bringing in society and bringing in community is always a challenge, because in Southern Africa, where we do a lot of these projects, the most important thing for community is, where do I get my next plate of food tomorrow? So, all the important aspects of biodiversity sometimes does not relate to people that are worried about having food. And this becomes really a challenge. So what we try and do with these restoration projects is that we try and find a way of reinstating some kind of land use that can provide them with an opportunity to generate some kind of revenue and support the mining industry or the mining company to be able to do what they are obligated to do in their rehabilitation or restoration efforts. But it's so important that we are community involved, that they need to understand that we are trying to create a resilient system. So we have to get their involvement in that sense, other than just worrying about, where my next plate of food is coming from. And this is a really big challenge. And this is what we try and do through these projects, is try and educate people that if they can see the longer term impact of what they're doing, that this will ensure that they will be able to generate sufficient amount of revenue to be able to care for their families. Now, the corporate responsibility is always there to try and reinstate what was there before, and even better. And sometimes this is always a challenge. I try and be optimistic very often, but there are some efforts that are being done that are fantastic, but they are of the lesser amount. So bringing back an area and bringing in all the soils that need to now become productive and have to be revegetated, this is the baseline obligation of a corporate entity. And what we now need to do is we now need to try and get communities involved, because the idea is, and the expectation is, that this land will become theirs that they can use. But if they are not familiar with what the foundation is being given to them, they're not going to know how productive and how valuable this land can be. And this is why it's so important to get them involved through the rehabilitation process as such. So we started a project on one particular mine that I'm now using as a case study, where we've got the community involved. This particular project is looking at taking a piece of land and trying to make it productive, and productive in the sense that we're trying to create value for the mine. A community trust fund has been established for this community, where the species of interest is the elephant bush, pork bush, Porticularia afra, which is known as an indigenous plant in South Africa that is very well known for sequestering significant amounts of carbon. And this plant has now been introduced to a large area on the mine. And we have erected a couple of community nurseries where the people have been trained to produce these plants and are sold back to the mine. This is very valuable in the sense that they now can generate income and at the same time provide an input for rehab for this mining company. And the mining company has taken on the endeavor to now try and make sure that this area that is now being established to this plant can be incorporated into a carbon sequestration and carbon farming model, which would then eventually be registered and the carbon credits would then be obtained, and that will be reinvested back into the community trust fund, which will then further support these community members to further produce their nurseries and the plants for these areas on the rehab site. Now, these communities obviously not only looking at vegetation, we've also got them involved in using rehabilitated land to produce biomass, land that's not maybe potentially suitable for food production, but it's valuable for biomass. And this biomass then gets reprocessed into compost, and this compost is then sold back to the mine because the mine spends a significant amount of funds on bringing in these inputs, these rehabilitation inputs, from outside the mine. So instead of importing these products to be able to do their rehabilitation efforts, they are now allowing or helping the community to produce these inputs on the mining site and buying it back from them to be able to do the rehabilitation further, which has been quite a great model. It's supporting the community. The community is actually seeing that they're improving the land so that they can generate more income, and that's trying to create their interest in this. So just in conclusion, it's really important to valorize the land restoration inputs that are being done there, that the community is able to see the resource potential. Very often we see rehabilitated land as a liability and not an asset. And if we can show this asset value to the community, they'll get excited about it. We have to allow the communities to have an ownership potential, see the ownership potential, so that the value of this land can be seen, because immediately they have a market for the products that they're producing on rehabilitated land, because the company that's doing rehabilitation and mining is buying the inputs back from them. So that really helps them. And then you create that land stewardship mindset, because now it's of value to them. What's really important is we have to select and train people. Not everybody are agriculturalists. And communities have certain expectations, and especially those that are associated with mining companies, their family members are working for the mines, and there's significant amount of benefits that come with these associations with the mining companies. But as soon as you change the land use going back to some kind of agricultural or restoration efforts, the benefits are not the same. The remuneration amount values are not the same, and these expectations have been created. And when we go back to these other alternative land uses, this is never met unless you can create some kind of entrepreneurial opportunity for these community members, which they can then realize those similar benefits. So we have to teach people to monitor and to collect data. I do believe in citizen science. I think that's one way of inclusiveness with getting people involved so that they understand, and from children, from youth upwards. And that's where how you get community to grow and obviously get invested. I always believe that we must not neglect indigenous knowledge and the experience of local communities. They live that land, and we must never neglect that. So lastly, I just want to say we have to create a community service provider opportunity for these communities. So what is being done in this particular project, these land restoration products or inputs that are being used by the mine to meet the responsibilities and obligations are now being bought from the communities. And the community that didn't have land is now using the land of the mine that's being rehabilitated to a certain baseline, which they then can use to produce these products and sell it back to the mine. I want to thank you very much and look forward to a further discussion.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks for this contribution and talking about the impacts on local communities and how they can be positively impacted by restoration projects. Now, I would like to call Adewumi Owalabi. He's the managing director from Aerobic Agroforestry Limited, a Nigerian company. He has a background in agriculture and agribusiness, and after working many years in the agribusiness sector, has now initiated a new company working in agroforestry, and will talk to us a little bit about this emerging sector in West Africa. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I don't have a slide here because we want to encourage every one of us to focus on my face so that you won't be looking at it. So thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Adewumi Owolabi. I'm the managing director of Aerobic Agroforestry Limited. We are based in Nigeria. We specialize in the production of various agroforestry seedling commodities. I'm proud to tell you that we are one of the biggest seedling producer in Nigeria, produce about 4 million agroforest seedling annually. I have a background in agriculture, and then I've started with livestock production. I'm only trying to give you a little background of how I came about the business of restoration. So some time ago, I visited South Africa, and I discovered that they do a lot of work on landscape restoration. So when I came to Nigeria, Nigeria is a vast land, very big land, but in the 60s, we have our landscape well covered with natural forests. But come back to this year, the whole land area have been depleted to a level that my country is no more green, but brown. That is a very serious challenges. And to buttress the point, FAO in their report of 2025 declared Nigeria as one of the deforest country in the world. That is quite very alarming appellation. Now, for us to be able to restore our landscape, for us to be able to use our land effectively and productively, we need to do both action. We need to do a lot of work to see that these problems are well addressed. And incidentally, a that was about 53 million population in the 60s, and now 230 millions in population. That to tell you that we need more land, more fertile land to be able to feed ourselves. Now, so I approached one of the state government to allow us to adopt one of the degraded forest land in Ala Forest Reserve, which is about 45,000 hectares. This is a very wide areas of forest land that have been depleted due to perennial bushfire, grazing, indiscriminate grazing of farmland, and at the same time, some farmers have encroached the area for edible crop production. So for us to be able to address the contending need of every one of us, the farmers want to use the land for edible crop production, for food production. The farmers, the cattle rearers, they want to use the land to graze their farmland too. And we have totally depleted the land. What do we need to do? I came up with an idea that, okay, we can encourage farmers, both the cattle rearers, the edible crop farmers, to incorporate tree planting into their business. And that is how we are able to get their attention. So for that, for us to be able to do that, we give them free vegetable seedlings. Free vegetable on condition, one condition. The condition is that you must be able to plant trees, incorporate it into your business. So with that, we have been able to plant well over 1 million trees and restore quite a numbers of land area that has been hitherto depleted. This is working very well for us, and we are enjoying the cooperation of the local community in this very noble idea of landscape restoration. This is my approach to how we can support our restoration effort and bring our land to be very productive and sustainable for us. Thank you for listening.
Finally, I would like to introduce you to Aristide Quadio. He's the general manager at CEA Group, a company working in certification logistics in Cote d'Ivoire, but is currently aiming and has a dream to restore 9,700 hectares of land in his home country. Welcome him.
Morning, everybody. I'm here very enjoyed to present tomorrow my presentation. I want to present myself. I'm Aristide Quadio, come from Ivory Coast, and I am the manager of CEA Group, which have a organization in the private sector. I want to clearly, I am very well in French, but today I want to try to present in English. Okay. Uh, I want to say in Ivory Coast, we have identified some difficult in north of our country. So there's part of our country is very difficult for another body, another agricultural, which leave them. Uh, the difficult which has identified is that these projects are not a good land for projects their food to help them to develop their development. For us, which has in private sector, it's more important for our organization to help all community which live where we develop our activities. So, in this part of Ivory Coast, you have identified 5,000 persons which has impacted by the bad land which don't help them to produce a good food for their help. When me and my organization I identify this problem, we have defined one project which can use the manioc, the Sri manioc, manioc,
Um, cassava.
cassava. We can use the cassava to develop an agroforestry system for restore this land. So when I take this project, I take four targets. The first target is to restore 5,000 hectares for this community and help them to produce one 120 ton of esculenta each year. The second target for us is to improve the income, living income. For this, there are not a lot of money to develop this. Lot of money to develop these activities, these development, and all it is possible for this good life. So when I take this second target, is for us to diversify this living income and produce a new project which can help them to get a good life. The third target which I take is to reduce a land degradation. So when I put in this land agroforestry seeds, it's more important for us to reduce les pertes de récolte. De récolte. Uh, it can when I put the seeds which come from agroforest system, these practice can help them to reduce the loss in the field. So after this project, the fourth target for us is to a promotion of the agroforest system in all Ivory Coast. We are take after this we target four impact which are found. The first impact is to improve a good living income for this project for projector. The second is to restore the land and help them to develop a new project in the first field. And the third is to restore the food security, which can help them to get a more life in these countries. And the last is to develop a new job for the young people, which help usually this community to develop this activity. So when we have take this project, we have shown them to our government to approve and to help them to develop a new partner in the private and the public sector for develop a good project for our community. It is not our usually activities because we have come from the private sector. I am not a public sector which have take the target all day. So I want to stop them my presentation, and I am ready to get some question to develop some opportunity to help someone to get more understand. Thank you so and
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you a lot. We can now bring our speakers back to the stage. Yeah, we can bring our speakers back to the stage. We'll begin our panel discussion. Sorry, there's not enough space here. Thank you all for the presentation. We had a great variety of projects coming from 3 different continents, coming from the private sector, public sector, NGO sector as well. And with this big variety of projects and experiences, before we go into the details of your specific project and we talk about the impact in the communities, I wanted to understand from you a little bit how do you see the discussions that are happening here at COP and they happen in this multilateral environmental context for multilateral environmental agreements and the targets that we mentioned. We talk all the time about land degradation neutrality. We talk about the G20 restoration target. We talk about CBD. We just heard Bethany talking about the guide for the target 2 of the Committing Montreal GBF. And I wanted to see from your perspective, from your experience, how these targets and how also the conversation come into fruition in the ground. Do they trickle down to the ground? To the ground? Do you see them? Are they part of the planning of your project, or do they just stay a little bit more in the abstract in terms of the influence, or maybe even the advocacy of some of the constituents of a country, or stakeholders of a specific project, or specific community that might be affected? Just share with us a little bit your experience. You can take the floor as you wish, but the question is open to all of you.
Thank you very much for your question, Mateus. I think in our perspective at Instituto Terra, we started the project considering the local challenges and also the local reality. But after a while, when we are trying to access funds, for example, and when we are trying to explain to all over the countries what we are doing, we have to have a standard. So we are, after the beginning of the project, we rebuilt all the methodology and all the targets considering the what the globally we are considering the standard. I don't know if you
And maybe
understand.
because you're one of the first ones to do it back in the 90s, where some of the standards have not been developed yet. The conventions were still in their early stages after Rio 92. So maybe you're one of the prosecutors, the first ones to do it.
Mateus, I think it depends on the community that you're dealing with. The local communities that we work with are not aware of all these initiatives. I think it's our responsibility as maybe the corporate community or the academic community, which we're well aware of what we trying to do on ground level. I think we try and make sure that we align with the discussions and things that we experience here at COP, and I think that's important because it benchmarks our efforts to the world, and we learn a sufficient amount of what's going on and the rest of it. Everybody's got the same challenges. Everybody's got communities to deal with. So I think at that level, we're well aware, and these kind of discussions are valuable to us. When we go down to ground level, they're not interested. But it's important for us to educate that what they're doing is for the bigger interest and the bigger the bigger picture.
Okay.
You can go.
Hello. Hello. Um, while I was making a keynote presentation and introduction earlier, I spoke about the challenges we are facing in Nigeria and why we need to wake up so that we can be able to get away from the wrong appellation that we have been given by the FAO as being one of the deforest country in the world. That is one of the reasons that spurs our business organization to see what we can be able to do. And then we have been so much well influenced by the targets set by organizations like UNCCD, G20, Afri 100, that is looking at how we can restore about 100 hectares of land in Africa. So we key into that, and then we have adopted some of their strategies, like community development, community participation. We also look at how we can get the community that are very close to the forest being funded. It's not necessarily we allow them access to um, fund, like giving them direct money. We can look for a way to encourage them. They may not know the influence deforestation may have on their environment because of their level of education or consciousness. But for us, we look at what really matters to them most is food first. And and how can we address issue of food and attach it to land, landscape restoration. So that was why I mentioned earlier that we give them free vegetables, seedlings, fruit seedlings. This we encourage them that okay, if you are able to plant 10 trees within a land area that you have, we will be able to give you so numbers of vegetable seedlings that will make your household and your family to be productive, which we can use to address your immediate problem. And then through that, we have been able to find a way to put some trees that are beneficial for both the environment, for them, and as well for the country's salary. So this is how we have been able to be significantly impacted or directed with the strategies of the organization like UNCCD, Afri 100 and others. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Maria.
Thank you. So, working for the government and coming from the public sector as also as a national focal point for this convention, I think the most important thing is that we talk to each other. The synergistic implementation of the three Rio conventions is not just a thing that we like to talk about in these places. It's something that is really the key to achieve actual commitment and actual action at the local level. So it's very important that the national focal points, if there are many here probably, talk to each other for the three Rio conventions and that we try. It's not double accounting, people. It's just making sure that we are being efficient in the way that we manage our resources. So I think and thank you so much for that question because I think it's key. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, thank you. For me, to take our good target for the land restoration for our community, it is more important to take 3 points, which for me is very important. I come from previous sector. The first point, it is very important to take part. It is the social, the human, which are living in this community, which need to, if you don't evaluate a good need for this community, it is not possible to do a good restoration for this land. For me, when I take this need for this community, we can do a good evaluation for help them in the first point. The second point, it is the economic part. In the private sector, for us, it is important to do a profit. But when, for the first point, I take the importance of the community, also there is benefit which I can obtain with my organization. It's more important to develop some activities which can help them to improve their life. So the first point come is the environment point. When I develop some living income for this community and help them for develop some activities from job, the environment part come in the third, in the last point. And after we have take the third point, for me it is the more practice which I can use to develop some land restoration in the Africa, in the world. Thank you for me.
Thank you. It's fascinating how every time that we talk about restoration, we end up talking about people. They are the ones primarily affected and hopefully affected by land degradation and benefited by land restoration projects. And I wanted to take the conversation a little bit to this theme, and I wanted to ask you, Maria. You were talking to me yesterday about the consequences for local people in Mar Menor, in Spain. How did they react when the project was launched? How did the government try to integrate them into the planning, into the also in the implementation of the project? Tell me a little bit how that's going.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. Actually, we have been very, very active in trying to engage all people and all stakeholders in the process. And I think it's for the benefit of everyone because, first of all, I work for them. They are paying my salary, right? So that's the first thing that I like to tell people. I'm here because I work for you. So please tell me what you would like this to be like. Because it's not, we can't make the decisions just for the sake of planning or meeting some kind of goals. We just need to engage people and make sure that they are okay with that. So we really made a big effort to try to reach some co-construction processes for these nature-based solutions and for all the ecosystem-based approaches that we have been dealing with. And for some of the projects, I think we reached a lot of agreement with so many farmers and trying not to disrupt the economy, the local economy, but on the contrary, trying to help them transition to a more regenerative agriculture model, right? So, yeah, I think it's key because otherwise you are not changing anything. You're just imposing things on people. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Now moving to Carolina, I had the privilege to meet to go to Instituto Terra this year, and I could see the huge impact that the restoration project had in the community. Could you explain to us a little bit more, to those who are not familiar, with how Instituto Terra works with its community, with education, and also forming professionals to work in the field?
Thank you, Matheus. Since the beginning, in 1998, when Instituto Terra was created, we feel the challenge about the workforce on this region. Because there's no people prepared to rebuild a forest, to plant trees and all, collect seeds, collect native seedlings. And so since 2005, we have this course at the institute that we called Nucleus of Study and Ecosystem Restoration. So we are preparing new people to do this work. So every year we receive almost 100 students there, and they stayed for all over the year at the institute learning how to rebuild the forest. All the process since the beginning, since they identify the forest fragments around the region, also collect seeds, preparing the seedling at the nursery, plant the trees and all the mountains. So, and also now we are teaching them how to work in agroforest systems. So we are trying to prepare the new generation to do this because, and also these students are from the region. They are students from the farm schools on the region, and they are really poor. They are from vulnerable families from this region, and we provide thanks to partnerships. Not just it's not our money; it's thanks to partnerships that we are able to provide all the support for these students.
Thank you. Wayne, do you listen to me? Yeah. Wayne, could you you have already dealt in the question of the impacts of local communities, how they can be how they can benefit from restoration projects. But in your view, going a little bit further, how do you feel they can be? You're talking about how sometimes they are uh, people that might be willing to work for the mining sector and restoration sector feels a little bit less advantageous. In your perspective, how can we make land restoration more attractive to them? Or what could, not just for the private sector, but thinking about a cross-sector engagement, how can we maybe talk to the public sector and make them aware of maybe having incentives for this new phase of for this new industry, for these new green jobs as well?
Thanks, Matthias. I think what's really important is to understand your community. The community, like I said, not all of them are agriculturalists. Not everybody is interested in that. Some people are more interested in the finance. Some are more interested in business. Some just want to have a job. And I think once you can understand your community, then one can go to the public sector and obviously find support of trying to create some kind of integrated land management system. Because at the end of the day, these communities are not going to relocate. They are dependent on the land, they've always have been. And if they are in remote areas, they have to, when the mining company arrived, it provided a lot of people with jobs. And that was the first thing. Everybody got a job, and they took on the job. Now, when the mine closes, the mine is moving. Some of them might go with the mine, but a large component remain because they've built their house, they've built their homes, and so forth. But now, not everybody is going to be able to have a job at the mine. So the next land use has to support these people and to gain, because to meet the expectations that they had when they worked for the mines, that you're not going to do that from just doing a normal agricultural, have a couple of grazing cattle there and planting vegetables. That's not going to happen. They're not going to want to go back to a subsistence livelihood. So you have to be able to try and create, and that's what the mining companies that we're working with are starting to realize, that we got to find what the land value is now, and maybe create some other intensive operation. Maybe it is an intensive agricultural activity, which still allows the jobs that can, people that are in finance, people that are interested in management or things like that, that they can still participate. But that particular activity then becomes an entrepreneurial sort of approach, and that entire new business becomes the communities and is now transferred to them, and obviously to. So that's one way that we can try and get public intervention and obviously interest to be able to support those reinstate, just trying to create new business on that particular land where mining is no longer going to take place. And that is one way we can incorporate. Along with the mining, mines put up schools. You know how many mines, when they close, there's nothing to support the school further, because some of our public funds were never made provision for that school in the first place. Now the mine closes, what happens to the school? The school closes. So one has to try and replace that industry with something else to be able to maintain the teachers that came out of the community to support that school, or the clinic, or whatever that came out there. So that's one way that we have to do it, is we have to unpack your community requirements. The communities must dictate.
Really interesting. But I have a following up question that I saw from your presentation that got me really curious. You talked about land stewardship. And so, to who belongs the land in the end when the mining left? When the mine left, the company left, and the mine is there degraded, and now you're doing a restoration project. How can these communities feel entitled to this land? Is that land theirs? And how can they profit from this, right?
Yeah. So until the mine receives closure, it will always remain the mine's land. But what will happen is that the communities can lease the land to be able to improve the land. So I think that's, at the end of the day, is these are the kind of agreements that have to be put in place, so that if you're getting communities involved in this land, that there's no risk of the mine selling the land and everything that is being built on that land is now lost. And those are the kind of sort of discussions that need to take place. What the mining, and again, I'm referring to companies that we're working with, that's starting to realize that the efforts that they have in doing rehabilitation are very short-term focused. It's like We're going to quickly go in there, fix the soils, plant vegetation, and then the land is just left. And that's where the problem lies, is that that land has to be managed. And they do not have the ability to manage it because their core business is mining. But the communities have the ability to manage it. And the efforts and the funds that the mining companies have been putting into that land management should now be directed to the communities. If they then understand that they're becoming the stewards of that land and they're generating an income, then obviously they're going to be interested in looking after it because it's in their best interest and the mining company's best interest, because that will build their, that will bring them closer to mine closure. There will always be liabilities on a mined area, and the biggest one is water. It's probably the most restrictive resource that does not allow mines to close. And that's obviously something they need to look after. But getting the community involved to start, just look at the amount of funds that mining companies spend on 1 hectare of land. That is the equivalent to the income of about 20 families on 1 hectare. That should be given to them to look after. And once they understand that it's important to look after that land, it will keep them involved. And I think that's what's important.
Fascinating. Thank you. Now, at the moment, moving back a little bit to your project and to the private sector. Now that we tackled a little bit with Wayne, how do you see what are the new financial solutions that are available or not for you in the agroforestry system that you're implementing? And we know that it's been a sector that's growing a lot. It's been talked in many of the discussions we're having here at COP. Might be somehow reflected in negotiations as well about agri-food systems. So give us a little bit of your perspective. Is there enough funds? What is it that in Nigeria you observe as financial tools that could help develop new solutions for agroforestry?
Funding of food production linked to agroforestry business should be a serious concern. The poor, the rich, they depend on one thing: they eat. And the land that produces this must be well cared for. Otherwise, we won't have any. We can't be eating here. So the land must be taken care of. And there are several ways we can make our land very sustainable. So coming to your question, so what that means that we must be able to look at how we can address this by putting so much fund into lands to make it very productive. For Aerobic Agroforestry Limited, we have enjoyed some tremendous support through some funding from Afri 100 through Terra Fund that we got sometime 3 years ago to support our business. Fine, it's a low interest rate business, about 8% with a long-term repayment plan. So that has really helped us. And objective to restore about 100 hectares of degraded land in Africa. So when we got to know about this, we quickly key into that, and we have been impacted through that. Not only that, here in Nigeria we have some philanthropists who are very keen about environment, who are very keen about food production too. So we have also been able to access some grants through them. To mention one, Tony Elumelu Foundation is one that has really supported our work. And not too long ago too, UNCC came with a brilliant idea to partner us with Tree Nation. And with that, we have been able to key into that, and they are funding some of our projects too. So I want to believe that there are many funding opportunities out there. We all need to do more about information, getting information about them to assess and to be able to key into that. So we have blended finance, we have impact funding, we have several funding that can really catalyze the idea of restoration project. So it is up, I've benefited, and I want to believe some of people listening to us too, either you are in Africa or in Europe, there are open opportunities that you can also benefit from.
Okay, thank you. Aristide, uh, you talked a little bit about your business in your new project in land restoration. Could you explain to us a little bit how is your perspective in balancing profit and ecological impact?
You speak in French.
You can speak French. I'll try to translate. I'll try to do a live translation here. Don't
Ok, thank you. Alors,
interpretation.
pour moi, le rôle du secteur privé est crucial et important pour garantir la restauration des terres en Afrique.
He says that the private sector is essential to secure land restoration in Africa for him.
Le secteur privé fait des profits.
The private sector is looking for profit.
Les profits qui sont faits doivent être utilisés pour accompagner les communautés dans la restauration de leurs terres afin de garantir de meilleures conditions de vie.
And these profits should be used to land restoration efforts so they can help their local communities have a better quality of life.
Donc, on devrait encourager le secteur privé à davantage faire des profits, mais il serait important de regarder quelle est la proportion de ce bénéfice-là qui va assister les communautés dans la restauration de leurs terres.
So his question is how can measure the balance between their profits and how much of these profits return into positive effects for land restoration in the communities.
Lorsqu'on réussira à vérifier la qualité des fonds qui accompagnent les communautés, on devra maintenant regarder quel est l'impact que cela a sur leur mode de vie.
So depending on the funds that go into these projects, how much of them can really impact the lives of people.
Lorsqu'on aura fini cette approche, c'est de regarder comment est-ce que cet impact, aussi bien sur le bien-être humain que sur les conditions de vie, peut aussi avoir un impact significatif sur l'environnement.
And secondly, how the impact on the quality of life and human well-being can also translate into positive impact for the environment.
Donc pour moi, aujourd'hui, le secteur privé est capital dans l'accompagnement des organisations en vue de la restauration des terres. Mais c'est de regarder comment est-ce que le secteur privé, en termes de qualité de contribution, pourra être présent sur la scène de tout cela qui restaure la terre.
So his reflection about the quality of the impact and the capital that's implemented by private companies working land restoration. Okay, that's it. I had another question for you, but I think we have a good presence of audience, and I would like to, for the next 10 minutes, open the floor to questions. Okay, we have a question here.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the insightful presentation. Mine is more of a contribution. When it comes to land restoration, there are interests. The public sector, the private sector, the non-profit sector, and the businesses. I believe the interest of the people should be most important. Before the mines came to the community, they existed. The mines is coming to take something from the community. So whatever interventions should be put in place in that community should be a sustainable intervention that will keep the community even after the mines leave. So I think policymakers should make sure that when these businesses come, they are impacting sustainably to the communities. Not just about taking and leaving and then looking for the next intervention or the next business to come and give social responsibility. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Any comments?
I would ask you how historical the history of the land is represented in your work for you too. How because you're talking about the difficulties of bringing the communities involved into the project, but we're talking about traumatic invasion most of the time. So how does this history of land is in your work?
Yeah, if I may answer that, the history of the land is really important because I think for any mining company to be able to plan what they're going to do after mining, they have to understand the history of the land. Very often, it depends on what the land was used for prior to mining, and it does not mean that the land prior to mining was used sustainably in the first place. There was a lot of agricultural activities that were poor, which actually also had a degradation effect, like overgrazing. So a lot of communities were grazing the land, overgrazing it. There was a lot of erosion. Mining companies come in there and they evaluate the land, and then the legislation says they have to bring the land back to what it was, or even better. Now, when the land is already degraded before you mine it, it's so much easier for them to come and reinstate something that's better than what it was prior to mining. In other cases, that might not be the fact, that there might be some natural rangeland or pristine land that has got a good biodiversity component. That makes it a lot more challenging for them because that's more difficult to be able to reinstate. But so the history of the land is really important. A lot of the land prior to the mining, the communities were already suffering. Now, the fact that the mining company arrives provides them with a lot of opportunity. Some of them get jobs there that they earning salaries that would be the equivalent to what they were earning in their own way 20 years before, for 20 years. So they're getting a lot out of the mining. But as she rightfully said, what happens thereafter is really important. And the history of the land is important, but it might not necessarily be important for them for their well-being. But there's a lot of debate around that.
I don't really understand because of the sound. Can you repeat the question, please?
She was asking about the history of land.
Okay, the history of
The
the land.
history of land.
Okay. At Instituto Terra, if you can imagine, is like at the beginning it was a forest, Atlantic forest, but after the colonization in Brazil, the colonization starts on the beach, on the
Coast.
the coast. So the Atlantic forests are the forests that cover all the coast in Brazil, and that's just 12% of remains of this forest, considering the colonization. So Instituto Terra lands, the trees were cut to raise cattle, and also to sell these trees to build everything with wood, like in France, they bought a lot of pau Brasil from Brazil to build violins. So now these trees we don't have more pau Brasils in Brazil anymore. We almost don't have. So the history of this land is related to this, to the colonization, to sell wood, and also to raise cattle. But and it was a farmland. It was a farm from Sebastião Salgado family, and he decided to bring the forest back for this land, like his legacy. But nowadays we are working in a huge area. We are trying to go further and trying to bring the forest back to all this watershed, not just on his farm. So that's the story.
We have time for a quick question, the final one. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm Innocent from Youth Initiative for Land in Africa. Um, it's really important to know that um, degraded land is caused by all the women. So this is what is very important is like what we are doing to limit it, this action for land degradation. That is very important. And the second thing also, in a rural area, we know that they are using the local language. How are you mitigate the local language to this advocacy work that you are doing? Because if we are speaking English and then we are speaking French or we are speaking Portuguese and then the local language are not using, how we can really sensitize the rural area people to have some good practices to restore land. That is the first part of my question. And second part is, sometimes we degraded the land through the land leasing. When we are leasing land or we are renting land, how the contract between the parties of this land leasing, what is the different article who engage the user of the land to respect the different practices of land restoration. This is missing in our different policies. So we need to look at this angle and bring back or bring in the, let's say, in the local level and the different contracts between the different parties, how we can engage those people who are using land to respect the different practices of land restoration. If we cannot do that, I think we will still there talking, but no action for very great sustainability. Thank you.
Someone would like to answer to that? You can go.
I would like to react to the second question. And I will use our case as an example. Like I mentioned earlier, the land we are currently using for restoration exercise belongs to the state government. It's about 45,000 hectares of the forest or degraded land. It was a very thick forest before, but the activities of the farmers, indiscriminate grazing, logging, and poor management has turned the place to be a barren land. So when we approach the state government to allow us adopt the land, we enter into a memorandum of understanding to use that land for 55 years. We want to believe for 55 years we must have been able to do some reasonable work to restore the area. So, and within the contents of the MOU we signed, the do and don't were clearly stated. We should not build a factory there. We should not go into any other thing than tree planting. So these are well stated. And before, by the way, the land was actually a forest land before. So it will be very crazy for us to go there and start building factory, estate, and all these things. So it is very good to go into an agreement that we address the issue you want to do, not taking possession of the land and do otherwise. So that is my own point about that.
Je reprends en français. OK. Alors, je vais m'attaquer à sa deuxième question.
He's going to reply to the second question.
OK, relativement aux engagements des parties qui doivent restaurer la terre lors de son utilisation. Pour moi, lorsque un cédant accorde sa terre à un utilisateur, il doit avoir un engagement en fonction des pratiques qui seront mises en œuvre sur la terre, en fonction des cultures ou des activités qui seront réalisées sur la terre. Il faudra aussi indiquer un calendrier pour permettre la mise en œuvre d'actions de restauration des terres au regard des activités qui ont été mises en œuvre sur la terre.
So he's talking about the development of a calendar and an action plan in relation to projects and activities in land restoration.
Lorsque l'activité a cette capacité à user significativement la terre, c'est clair que les actions pour sa restauration seront encore plus corsées, seront encore plus lourdes, encore plus solides à mettre en œuvre. Et donc, ça prendra plus de temps pour l'utilisateur de la terre.
If the activities are really specific to this kind of land, they'll be more effective and therefore more productive in the end.
Le dernier volet qui est important à prendre en compte, ça ne doit pas rester seulement qu'entre les acteurs, entre l'utilisateur et le cédant. Ça doit aller au niveau des autorités du pays qui sont les garants de la gestion de la terre des différentes communautés.
So it is also not just a question between who is leasing and who is taking the lease from the land, but also the state who is the guarantor of this contract.
Voilà. Je vais partager un exemple, celui de la Côte d'Ivoire, où aujourd'hui on a des contrats qu'on appelle des contrats agraires qui permettent de sécuriser la terre entre les cédants et l'utilisateur. Mais ce contrat, bien qu'il soit signé au sein de la communauté, va jusqu'aux autorités administratives pour qu'il soit enregistré afin de faire preuve de foi s'il y a lieu.
So in this leasing contract, even if it's signed by the local communities themselves, they have to go up to the central government to be authorized.
Donc voilà un peu un exemple qui peut être un modèle qu'on peut communiquer au sein de l'Afrique dans d'autres communautés où le besoin se fait sentir.
Yeah, this is an example from the center of Africa that he can share a little bit later. We have to end our session now. I'm sorry, but feel free to reach to us and to our panelists. They'll be here for a little while. Thank you very much for coming. It was a great pleasure to moderate this session. Thank you.